Hello there. This session is about electronic editions. But first things first, before we can talk about electronic editions, we need to know what an edition is. The standard definition of an edition is any version of a book that is printed from substantially the same setting of time. But if such a version essentially repeats the text of some earlier version without any intentional change, except maybe correcting a few minor misprints, then we don't usually call it an edition, just an impression or a reprint. An edition involves some degree of intentional change in the material. Such changes can be introduced by the author or the publisher, but there is also such a thing as an academic or scholarly edition, where a scholar examines an earlier text, as it may be a play by Shakespeare. Of course, there's no question of rewriting Shakespeare's words, but the scholar aims first and foremost to correct what appeared to be mistakes in the early versions of the play. Secondly, to compare it with other early or authoritative versions. And thirdly, to add notes, explanations, and other illustrative material. Now, first let's see how this happens in print. This is a page from one of the best known academic editions of any literary work, the Auden edition of Shakespeare. We are seeing a page from the play King Lear. What the editor regards as the best possible text he can manage is printed on top. There follow the textual notes indicating different readings in other versions, and below that again the commentary with explanations and other relevant material. Now, what shall we do if we want to present the same information on screen in electronic form? What will that look like, and what will that be the advantages? The big advantage is the fact that an electronic text employs the basic tool of the hyperlink. Those points of the text, usually indicated by bold type, or by colored type, or by underlining, that we click to open another window or a pop-up. This means that the material of the three sections that we saw on the printed page don't have to be shown all at once. They can be embedded one below the other, so to speak. And what we see when we open the screen is only the top layer showing the clear text. This is a very simple example of a hyperlinked electronic edition. It's a version of an old English poem called Dido to Aeneas. What we are seeing at this point is basically a clear text. But when we come to a word that carries a note, well, the word could have been hyperlinked, but in this case, the letter N appears next to it. And when we click on that N, the note on that word or that line opens up. This is, as I said, a rather simple example of an electronic edition prepared for a project called Copia, conducted by Cambridge University. Now just see how richly the same model can be developed, how complex it can be. What I'm now going to show you is a DVD of a very elaborate electronic edition of the great medieval Italian poem, Dante's Divine Comedy. Don't worry if you don't understand Italian, because what I'm going to show you is basically the way the electronic text works. Let's click on this link on the opening page, and this opens up this marvelous page which has an image of the medieval manuscript on one side in full color, and on the other side a transcript. Where are the hyperlinks, you see? Well, the answer is that every word in this transcript is a hyperlink. So let's click on this word, and at once you find that all the variant readings appear at the bottom of the page. Though in fact in this case there are no variant readings. All the texts consulted, whose names are given in abbreviated form here, have the same reading. But just above that you find that this entire line is given with all the possible variants you have in every word. Even that's not all. There are these drop-down menus which you can use to open up various other kinds of information. For instance, if you like, you can open an actual introduction giving you an account of the work, which will appear very shortly. There you are. Or if you like, you can do a search. Okay? Let's do a search for that word selva, which means forest or a wood, and it will show you how often the word occurs in the text. There you are. Okay, so this is where the word selva occurs in the various manuscripts all through the text. This edition of Dante's Divine Comedy may actually be the most advanced, and certainly one of the most advanced and complex electronic editions that has been devised to date. So you see how hyperlinks can not only open pop-ups and panels, but also lead us from one whole page or text to another. Whereas with printed texts, we would have to pluck another book off the shelf and flip through it to find the page we want. If there are several reference texts of this sort, or several types of information we want to access, the advantages of the electronic edition are obvious. Most ambitiously, an electronic edition can include multimedia resources. Spandana Bhomik, a postdoctoral fellow at the School of Cultural Texts and Records at Jadavpur University, has prepared an editing platform called Path.pom, the textual mirror, which does just that. Here is the opening page of Path.pom. Everything's in Bengali, but don't let that bother you. As with the Italian, I'll explain what every entry means. This entry, which looks like a book, opens up the text of that particular edition of the work, a clear reading text. The next one, here we are. This is something that is worth spending a little time about. This is the collation program. Collation in this context means comparing the variant readings in different versions of a work. In this set of color-coded bands you see before you, each band represents one version of one of two related plays by Rabindranath Tagore, Raja and Arup Rotan. And within it, each section represents a scene. I clicked on one particular scene in one version, and immediately the corresponding scenes in the other versions are highlighted and underlined. There apparently is no corresponding version in no corresponding scene in 2 or 3 versions, but the others show them. And in this control panel at the bottom, you find even an exact calculation showing what proportion of matches, what percentage of matches there are between the various versions. And if you click here, then you get an actual image of the text, which you can, if you like, magnify by a mouse over. Or, alternatively, if you click on another link down below, then you get the reading text. And below that again, in this lightly green shaded window, you get annotations or notes. So all these resources are combined within the same basic window. And even that's not all, because we can move on from it to show various other kinds of information. I clicked here on the control panel for one of the other texts, not the one which I chose as my basic text,
which is the 1911 version, but a 1916 version. And at once I get a panel opening up here on the right, which shows the correspondences between these two versions. A number of speeches correspond exactly as indicated by the grey lines linking them, but there are some speeches which only belong to the 1911 version and have no corresponding speech in the 1916 version. And sometimes later on it's the opposite. There are speeches in the 1916 version which you don't get in the 1911 version on the left-hand side. But even that's not all. Because now, if you click in the control panel on the text that I've chosen, which is the 1911 version, then that opens up another panel. See, this colored line here indicates that particular scene in the play. Within it, each section is a single speech. I click on a speech and the corresponding speeches in the other versions are highlighted and the proportionate matches are shown below. And then if I click on that again, I get this 4-window display which through a color code in 4 colors, black, red, blue and green, indicates word for word difference. I click on this red word and the variance in other versions shows up below. So this is a collation program prepared in Jadavpur University at the School of Cultural Texts and Records, which matches various texts, first scene by scene or chapter by chapter, then within each chapter, speech by speech or paragraph by paragraph, and within the smaller sections, word for word. Just to quickly complete our survey of Pata.Pun, there are 2 other icons here, one of which opens up the notes and even if you are authorized, lets you edit them. The other one opens up the image of the manuscript or printed page. As we've already seen these in brief, I won't repeat them, but go on to the last and most important and exciting feature of all, which is this particular logo on which you can click to play audio or video clips, including, in other words, performances of these plays. So using a platform like this, and though maybe nothing quite so advanced is in general use as yet, we can edit, let us say, a Shakespeare play to show pages of the original quarto and folio texts or any later editions we want, still photographs of performances or any other kind of illustrative material, video clips of performances, and of course audio clips besides any kind of annotation we want, layers of annotation which we can distinguish from each other. The play thus comes alive on the computer screen in a way it could never do on the printed page. This is exactly what happens in the biggest Shakespeare site I know of, the Internet Shakespeare Editions, maintained by the University of Victoria in Canada. We can use this site to make another point. All electronic editions do not go all the way. It may not be an integrated website. In other words, its different components may not be closely linked to each other. Hence, one cannot proceed from any one to any other freely, but one must access each component separately. Even so, such a website can bring together a range of material, including multimedia material, that a print edition never could. Let us look, for instance, at the edition, if you want to call it that, of one of Shakespeare's plays, Henry V. This is the full menu of Henry V as it appears on the Internet Shakespeare Editions. And just see how many items there are. It's a mine of information. You have to access them separately by clicking individually on the links. But added together, it provides an enormous amount of information that in print form would effectively need a library, combined with a library of audio and video material.
It's a question whether a site like this is best described as an edition or a database. In his important book From Gutenberg to Google, the textual scholar and theorist Peter Schillingsberg lays down the agenda for what he calls a knowledge site with all the various kinds of information that would contain. You can see a few salient pages from the book among your reading material for this lesson. The full-fledged knowledge site hasn't been created yet, though platforms, including homexspark.com, have prepared an elaborate framework for it. The knowledge site represents the acme of the textual database. In our next lesson, we'll be looking at textual databases and how to use them.